Let's see. All right. Um, let's see, we have some people coming in. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. Let's see. Coming out this evening, or this afternoon. Oh my goodness. We're used to doing stuff in the evening, but it's this afternoon. And we're going to be talking about the Motherlode. And I was really excited first about this book because it's sort of my era. And also to pair two voices together, one from here in Detroit and Clover Hope in Brooklyn, New York. Sort of a perfect time as this is because it's Women's History Month. And we're coming into spring, so we can start, kind of seeing each other and getting our book talks back on track like they used to be. So I'm going to do a little introduction for both of the ladies. We Found Hip Hop Foundation. It's here in Detroit, and Piper Carter is a co-founder of this foundation, and its mission is really, and she could tell you better, but is to build leadership, a love for the arts, and to influence the perception and roles of women in hip hop, current hip hop artists and future generations that may need to have this information. Piper Carter is not just the founder of We Found Hip Hop Foundation, a co-founder. She's also a community activist and the host of the Piper Carter podcast on the Detroit is Different platform. And that can be found wherever podcasts are available. And our author for this afternoon, Clover Hope, is a Brooklyn-based writer and editor. You could find her work in Vibe, Billboard, Essence, the New York Times, Vogue, and the list goes on. She was a co-writer of Beyonce's Black is King. And today, she is a professor at the New York University. And this is her first book, The Motherlode, 100 plus women who made hip hop. So we're gonna be treated with a conversation, and I'm gonna get off here, a conversation with both of these ladies. They were recently on a panel at, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, at the Hip Hop Museum. And that was also a wonderful celebration of Women's History Month.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Allison. And this is so exciting to be having this particular conversation at this particular time with this incredible person that we have before us, Clover Hope. I'll just again, my name is Piper Carter. I'm just going to be having a very brief conversation with Clover Hope, who has written this really, really wonderful, I'm going to call it possibly an anthology or I'll call it a current anthology of women in hip hop. I have been following you since the beginning of the launch of this book. I'm a huge fan. I'm an admitted stan of this work. It is no small undertaking what you've done. And I'm just really excited that you get a chance to share a little bit of yourself with us here in Detroit and everyone else that's listening online. Again, my name is Piper Carter. I have an organization, We Found Hip Hop, dedicated to centering women's voices. And this particular work is exactly the kind of work that we love and that we want to support and that we want to see more of. And so welcome, Clover,
Thank you so much.
to this space. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad you said Stan. I mean, you're the exact audience for it. But I'm also glad that I think it does hit a bunch of different types of readers. You know, like people who are like super old school hip hop heads, or if you're a new school hip hop head and you want to know more about like the older artists, or like you're a casual fan. You know, like I think, and I'm so glad that it's like touching, you know, like different types of people, but specifically kind of like our like this generation where, you know, like grew up on like a lot of these artists, and now we get to see, we have seen like the evolution in such a like in a like a really like in-depth way. And so that's, you know, it's a lot we can kind of like pass on to the next generation. Yeah.
And I love how, because there have been some other, you know, works before that have mentioned women, or women have had some pages. There is a whole other book that, you know, the Queens of Hip Hop. And I think the way in which you have done your book speaks to the uniqueness of it, and something that we have not seen before. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so I wanted to highlight the volume. Initially, I was going to have, you know, maybe around like 60 artists that I would highlight from over the years, starting from the beginning of hip hop. And the idea was to always try to tell this narrative and story of hip hop from just like the women's point of view, because you can tell a story of how the culture evolved and how rap as a genre, you know, like became like the biggest genre in the world. You can tell all of that just from the eyes of girls and from the women who are making this music. And you can touch on all these kind of milestones in hip hop that women were involved in, you know, as much as you could kind of like tell the story through just from a man's perspective, which is what has been done like for ages. And so that was the idea. And I really wanted to show that it's kind of like you know, I would challenge the average person to like name 100 rappers. Maybe after reading it, they could kind of like at least increase their like that number. But like I couldn't. It would maybe take me a long time to like name like 100 women in hip hop like before I started writing the book. You know, so it was a discovery process for me too. And you know, I really just wanted to show that there are so many women who've made an impact on the culture besides the ones that you know about, like the Missies and the Kims and all of that. Like they're in here, but there's also, you know, things about like JJ Fad and you know, who were signed to, you know, NWA or NWA, the same label as NWA, Ruthless Records. You know, there you know, Roxanne Shantae's contributions to actually helping to, you know, make hip hop popular or make rap popular, like commercially. You know, I wanted to just show that there's this breadth of talent. And especially at a time when we now have so many women at the top of the charts. And like, you know, we saw the Grammys, Megan and Cardi basically, you know, came away like they're the biggest story of the Grammys. And that is unusual. Like it's not, I kind of want people to know that that is not like it hasn't been that way for such a long time ever, actually, where two female rappers are at the top of the game and performing at the Grammys and actually winning Grammys like all at the same time and dominating that space. Like it really is not like this is a unique time. And you know, it's I think it's just cool to show like how we got here, basically.
Like for me, I think one of the most intriguing aspects of this work is your process and how you actually, you know, did the work to seek out different women. Could you talk about that journey? Because that for me is just so fascinating.
Yeah, it's it was like definitely a process that maybe like 2.5 years ago or so started with, you know, the idea itself, and then that germinating into research. You know, it like I had women in mind that I already wanted to highlight. You know, it was obviously, you know, Roxanne Shante, MC Light, Queen Latifah, and I did a little bit of digging and, just came across more women that I didn't know, women who, like had an impact in a way on like the West Coast in ways that I didn't know about, like Conscious Daughters or Boss, just me growing up as like a Queens kid. And so, I, added them to the list, and I kind of just kept adding, like the more I personally discovered women, and the more I kind of talked to them also. And so, I realized early on that I would need to interview the women. Like initially it was like I wasn't planning to interview so many women. And then, the more I spoke to them, and it just, like it was clear that their stories needed to be, and like I needed to put their stories like at the, even more at the forefront, in the sense that like some of the pages are straight up as told tos. So that means it's just in their voices. Like Mia X talking about like her dealing with image issues in the industry. Like that's all, like her voice without me kind of like writing around it. And so I have a few of those, like throughout, where it's just basically the women speaking. And, in between that, also kind of like sidebars, because I wanted to highlight, well, one, that women could be funny, like women rappers are funny, and here are some ways in which like they've been funny over the years, from like Cardi B to Nicki Minaj, and people like that. And I wanted to, so basically it was just a process of like doing research to come up with the initial list, and then speaking to the women, seeing what stories should be longer, and like which like Charlie Baltimore, she was one of the first people I spoke to, and she was just amazing in terms of talking about her relationship with Biggie, and like him kind of like encouraging her to write, and so I took all these stories, and it was all in pieces a bit, and I kind of I got, as I kept getting interviews and doing research, I put it together into like a narrative that tells the story of from the 70s, the first women MCs, to up until now with Sweetie and Megan Thee Stallion and Lizzo. And you get to see like some recurring themes that happen, and like some challenges and drama. So it was just a process of kind of figuring out like how each of their stories fit into like this wider story of hip hop, because you can see Roxanne Shantae's battle rapping, and and Remy Ma and Nicki Minaj is like beef between women, like that's like the recurring larger issue. For Eve, I wrote about fashion and like her style, and how women in hip hop have kind of like influenced fashion in so many ways. So I tried to kind of just think of like what was the bigger picture throughout that research process. And it was definitely an undertaking, because, in addition, like you said, I had to track down some women who are, not all over social media. Like it's not, I just think about like my parents' generation or whatever, and like older, like they're maybe like a little bit on Facebook, but it's not like, like they're not checking it all the time. And like, they're kind of like, not as attached to it. And so some were harder to reach than others. And, some I had to kind of take a while to get. I spoke to Vita, who was part of Murder Inc. And like I found her through speaking to Lady Luck, who like is another rapper featured in the book. So it was, a lot of that, like ping ponging a little bit.
Yeah.
So I actually got them. Yeah.
And what's exciting to me are the actual, like the personal stories, because for me, growing up in hip hop, I was one of those people who was reading Right On magazine and Word Up magazine.
Yes.
And then later I was following all the blogs, and I still do. And now I'm a huge YouTuber. And so I'm wondering, I know that Charlie Baltimore, ghost wrote for, or does maybe still for a lot of people in the industry. I'm wondering, is there something that you could share that's not so much like, oh my God, I'm giving away the book, something that you may have learned, like, oh my God, like that is incredible. from any of the
Um,
women?
yeah. And okay, maybe one is just like Silky Fine was also one of the earlier rappers that I spoke to. And she's from like she's like LA West Coast. I hadn't really known about her. I knew Romeo and Juliet, like that single that she had, it's like Romeo and Juliet. And like I knew that just from, watching like watching videos in the 90s or whatever. But I didn't know much about her. And so that was like I spoke to her, I think like a couple times, and um she like had uh like she kind of like came up with and alongside like Tupac and like his you know crew very early on. Like she met him like pre um basically like pre his peak in hip hop. So like her and his friend Mouse Man, who like I also spoke to, like they would hang out and like, uh be rhyming together, and like she contributed a verse to a song that he had with Bone Thugs, and I think like the song didn't end up coming out, or they ended up like cutting her from it. But she had a couple tracks with Tupac, and like she talked about writing with Eazy-E, and and she has credit on like one or two songs like on his album. And so that's one thing that was interesting, just that you have these women who were kind of like in the studio with guys, and maybe people don't even think about the idea of women writing for/with men, because you're always like, oh yeah, the guys are writing like their rhymes. But her Lady of Rage, like they were helping out with, Lady of Rage with Dr. Dre and Death Row Records. Like they were helping to write these records, and like helping to kind of, even just make creative suggestions, So that was one thing, that came about just from like speaking to the women, and just kind of like how much they are kind of like behind the scenes, kind of like helping create some of this magic.
And what's interesting is and I'm wondering if you saw this theme about
Mm-hmm.
the writing out of women. Has that been a theme? Like, and it seems as though your book is actually like writing them, like back in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how prevalent is this theme of being written out or not being included?
Yeah, I hope it's a corrective. I think you can see, for example, Straight Outta Compton, huge biopic about NWA. Um, it's obviously biopics tell the story from the perspective of the people making it, and there are so many parts that get left out. Like Dr. Dre and his, like the abuse towards D Barnes. Like there were parts that they don't want to highlight or get kind of sidelined. And one was JJ Fad. Like JJ Fad was not mentioned in that movie, and the success of Supersonic really did help fund those early NWA records. And Dre has mentioned this in the documentary that he did with about Interscope. He mentioned it, and how a lot of what they were able to do financially in the beginning, in terms of like even like getting studio time and making these records, was because the success of Supersonic on radio, and like that song blowing up. So in a way, that's how JJ Fad had an impact on like hip hop. Or you think about, at least for me, like when I'm watching certain like documentaries, like there's a docu-series on Netflix about hip hop. It's like Hip Hop Evolution, and I love this series. It's just like I think there are maybe like 4 chapters now, and it goes through different hip hop eras, and it highlights No Limit era. This was the Bad Boy Shiny Suit era. All of this. And I just kept seeing, I'm watching it, and I'm kind of seeing like, where are the women in all of this? And it is, again, like it's a really well executed documentary, but even there's no episode on like Lil Kim specifically. Like there should be a whole like Lil Kim era separate from like, you know, Bad Boy. And, you know, there was some of her, I think, like in the Biggie portion, but like there was just the time dedicated to like the women MCs, like over that series, like it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of, I was like, where are they? Like, you know, so it's those ways that I think, you know, history, hip hop history gets told, and, you know, people just kind of forget that there's this whole other element. I think with even like, you know, like the Versus series, they specifically are having like, I guess like a separate ladies night or ladies kind of element. But I do think there's some where you could have a like a woman versus a man, like in a in like some of those verses. You could have Missy versus Busta Rhymes. Like I think people have been saying this. You know, you could have, you know, you could mix it up and show that it's not that women have to be separate, like in this history. Like even though it's great to have the ladies special ladies night, um, you know, that they are like integrated. You know, like it's that's those are ways that you can see that it's some forgetting or
Yeah.
you know like separation. Yeah.
And speaking of Missy, how many of the women in the book that you spoke to were also women who were making the beats or doing the music production?
Mm. Oh yeah. I mean, Missy is singular in that way. I'm like flipping through. I mean, she did so much in terms of just like creating sound, songwriting, songwriting for herself and others, and not just rap, but like R&B. There's one part that you know, like that I found through research, I think it was like Styles P did an interview about making It's All About the Benjamins, I think. One of their songs, and like how Missy basically helped them like arrange, like she's like, you know, do this, do that, do that. And then by the end of it, they were like, oh wow, like just kind of, you know, you made this song. And so, but people don't kind of see that way, you know, see that. But she was pretty integral in like those early Bad Boy records. Like she was like working with Puffy. Um so like she's pretty singular. I mean, there are women like I guess you know like Lauryn Hill kind of like um you know like making you know like pulling double duty or whatever. But it is, you know, when you think about like women producers and like women getting credit for you know, for like producing something that is pretty unusual. Like a woman producer, I think still hasn't won like the producer of the year Grammy. Um, you know, like in all these years, in any kind of like in any genre. So, and Missy just got her songwriting Hall of Fame like induction, I think what, 2 years ago or so. So, you know, it's still these accolades and kind of recognition. Like it's still coming, like it's still just happening. And so that's what makes it interesting when, you know, like a Megan Thee Stallion wins Best New Artist and wins these Grammys like her first time out. When in general, like rappers have been, you know, like Nas, you know, had been nominated for like how many, and he just got his first one at that last Grammys. You know, it shows that there's something in the air. You know, like she's, you know, we don't have to wait to kind of give her that kind of recognition, like when she's actually at the top of her game. So it's something to kind of like acknowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm wondering because the way you've written it is like an anthology, or you know,
Mm-hmm.
just snippets. Well, how were you able to, you know, get this in such a succinct way? Because I'm sure when you know, when you talk to people, you know, there's a whole conversation that happens, and
Yeah.
then that conversation gets edited, you know, for time and
Right.
everything. So what is that like? Like, how do you decide like what you're
Mm-hmm.
going to keep, what you're going to, well, I don't want to say leave out, but you know, what you need to trim
Yeah.
down?
Yeah. And there was a lot of like biography, you know, that I had to leave out just because I couldn't get into detail about everyone's backstory, like too into detail. That's kind of like so many of them like need their own book and like just on, you know, like for themselves. but yeah, there were basically for each artist, I had a like an angle that I was in mind when I did my outline. So for Missy, I knew I was going to write about her music videos and like her production. And so I, uh, sought out like one of the members of her old group, Sister, and like spoke to her about her songwriting and all that. Like I had an angle for each, for the most part, for like each person. For Queen Latifah, um, and I knew I wanted to talk about like her movie career and how she kind of like stepped out of hip hop and basically became, like how a figure in Hollywood to the point that like people have forgotten like her rap career, but she, did so much like in rap and still use. I thought it was funny also that she still uses her rap name. Obviously it's like name recognition, but it's Queen Latifah, not like Dana Owens. So so I really just, once I knew what the angle was, I tried to just keep within that, like that boundary, because you could write so much about Queen Latifah, but well, one, I only have a certain amount of pages, and like I wanted to keep it focused so that basically, I try to think about what information to include that will serve the angle and like serve the story. And the story is like, how have women, like what's the story of hip hop and all the kind of markers of hip hop, um, just from the perspective of women. You could tell a story about hip hop becoming capitalist and like getting that success and like wealth that, the pursuit of wealth in hip hop through like Trina and like her kind of raps about money and sex, and how, her rapping about money and sex is also tied to, um, like being in a society where women aren't like, there, where there's inequities, and maybe her rapping about getting money is like trying to like equal the playing field a little bit. Like the scamming, like the scam raps and all that for women a lot of times, can we see it as something that's like, like trying to level the playing fields. And so I think there's basically, I try to just stick to the like this is a story of hip hop, and like these are how these women's personal stories like fit into that larger story. And then it was just try to kind of like carve and cut. I had to cut a lot, and that's the hardest part, to part ways with words, like for writers. It's for
Yeah.
sure.
And so in terms of like leveling the playing field, can you speak a bit about, the what you understood in terms of different women's position with power? Some of,
Mhm.
like you spoke about Queen Latifah, she's developed a level of power and ownership and this kind of thing. Have you seen in this idea of ownership along the way, or is that something that you noticed kind of came later with the women you spoke to?
Mm. Yeah, I would like your thoughts on this too, because it's I do think that like this is definitely like a DIY generation, and like a generation of ownership of image, lyrics, like the women from Nicki Minaj on. Not to say like the previous generation didn't have any, or that, because we had Remy Ma's and like Eve and like Trina and all that. There's a different level of it with social media. Like there's a different level of kind of controlling your marketing, one, and controlling your like what image gets put out there. And so I do think there's, from like Nikki pretty much set that she wanted to be a boss. Like she wanted to be able to step outside of rap and do fashion campaigns and beauty and TV, and she wanted to kind of be um, that like entrepreneur basically. And you could say that Queen Latifah kind of like kicked that door open, and Nikki was like, continue. She walked through the door, walked through that door, and now, you know, the women today are kind of able to be in the room actually, and then maybe further down we'll have them, being decision makers more and more. So people like Cardi B, I do think there's a certain level of like she's able to dictate what she wants to put out, how she wants to be seen, basically, in a way that I think artists of the 90s like didn't necessarily have that amount of control. It's like, well, you're gonna do kind of what the label thinks is sexy, or like what the A&R guy who is working your record thinks. So I do think it's kind of evolved, right? Like it's but at the same time, it's not like they have uh total autonomy because there's like always people around, and there's always kind of reactions to what women do. Like I think Cardi was talking about this recently. I think I faved a tweet yesterday or something where she was like, people are always kind of criticizing female rappers. And like it really is like an extra eyeball because they have to be so aware of how they look, and like just putting on makeup alone is a burden to me. Like as someone who has to like think about that also, like image and and like how you're perceived, and that's just something in general women have to battle on a daily basis. And that's not, yeah, it's the same for like female rappers. Like they still have that kind of hurdle, even as they have a certain level of like autonomy, I think.
Yeah, that's something, when I would shoot, I'm a fashion photographer. So when I would work with the different women, when you have budgets, the women's budgets are bigger than the men's budgets in terms of marketing, just because so much more has to go into marketing a woman than a man. And that's a whole nother thing. But but I'm just wondering, in terms of the book itself, if we look at, for readers or potential readers, if we look at, let's say, like on a timeline, you've got all the way from the beginning all the way up to, we'll say, contemporary, like percentage wise, like how much are will folks get in terms of learning about the past versus kind of understanding where we are?
It's definitely mostly a timeline of the past and like recent present, in terms of up to like maybe Nicki Minaj, and like Cardi B is the last entry in the book, in terms of like full page, like several pages of per each entry is dedicated to like a specific artist, and then I have like little like roundups, or like little like fun facts, like, so it's 100 plus women, but it's not like all like 1,000-word profiles on each person. It's kind of scattered, and so most of it is balanced toward telling you how we got here. And so I would say maybe 80% of that, and then there's the rest is like Nicki, Cardi, and like kind of some info on like Sweetie and the Lizzo generation and Megan. And it's, I think part of that is you can tell like a lot of the story of now by telling the story of the past. And so that is, the same issues that JJ Fad were dealing with in terms of like selling out, and, or being called sellouts, and being accused of kind of like selling out, and because they had a pop song, and, or like you can tell there's a similar there's a line from them to like a Lizzo, or like Nicki Minaj, who had to deal with being accused of doing too much pop music. There's lines from like Salt and Pepper to City Girls, who sampled their song like "I'll Take Your Man," like there, and from Trina to City Girls. So I think that's that's what I was kind of trying to do, is show that for many of the newer, younger artists, like popping right now, there's like the whole lineage that you can kind of, learn more about these newer artists by learning about their ancestors, essentially. So, an ancestor of Tierra Whack is Missy Elliott. So that was kind of thinking.
And what say you to the potential reader who's like, I don't care about hip hop.
Right.
I don't care about hip hop.
Yeah.
Why is this book important?
That's a good question. Yeah. I mean, you could, first of all, hip hop is all over still. Like if you look at TikTok, like all these challenges, all the kind of, they're bringing in old songs for like Push It. Supersonic has popped up on there via Fergie, but you hear all these kind of like old records out of context, and it's kind of like, it's sure you can like just take them in and like not kind of and just go along your way, but I do think it is cool to have like the context and like to be able to like, I don't know, spit back some facts to a friend, like, oh well, did you know this? Like, did you know that JJ Fad like helped to fund NWA records, and you're helping to like pass some knowledge on. I think also like even if you don't like, I'm not saying like don't read it, but like even like you can get information just like flipping through. Like I have these little nuggets of information like for each entry where it's fun. It's like bullet points about each artist. So it's meant to be both like sort of like textbook and coffee table book. The illustrations kind of like bring it alive, and I think it's like an artifact to have of like women who made an impact in the culture that you love, and if you don't love it, women who made an impact in just music in general, because these are just like these are music, some of them are music icons. If you think about Kim, Missy, Queen Latifah, Salt and Peppa, like these are people who should and maybe will be in like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And so like that's it's not just about hip hop, and it's also a larger story about women, just what women have to deal with in general, and like the inequities that exist in like all these industries that happen in hip hop. Also, it's not any different. Like Megan Thee Stallion still has to deal with being told that she's lying about her own like being shot, and like her own basically violence against her. So, and that happens in a bunch of different industries. So it helps to just have a, grasp. Like basically you should care. You should care.
Yeah. And I only have maybe two more questions, but one, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm wondering, because violence against women or abuse, sexual abuse, and even we've seen the other last week, we call it matricide, where women are murdered because they're women, or because they exude some level of sexuality, right? And I'm wondering, we do hear a lot of violence in the music, and I'm wondering if you've had women, talk to you about how they've either dealt with violence, or if they have found ways to support others that have dealt with violence. And I'm wondering if any conversation that you've had with women, with these particular women, centered on violence against women at all.
I think it's hard for them to, I think there's a reason it's hard for those stories to come out, or for them to kind of be comfortable telling those stories. Even after like I had spoken with Sherry Sheriff, who's part of Mercedes Ladies, for the book, like we hadn't talked about that. And then her allegations against Russell Simmons came out in the HBO doc On the Record, like as part of a web of stories in that regard. So um, I it wasn't like violence specifically wasn't something that came up versus what came up, I guess, like that was recurring was like an overall just feeling of, I don't know if attack is the right word, just feeling of discomfort in the culture that they felt like they were supposed to be a part of, but didn't feel a part of, basically, because it was just so male dominant or just so kind of misogynistic. And, like it is hard to kind of get your voice out and to maybe feel like you're speaking against the grain, basically, because that's what MC Lyte and Queen Latifah and that they were speaking against the grain of what was like the dominant narrative in hip hop by just talking about the word bitch and like being anti-misogynistic. So no kind of like at least from what I'm remembering off the top, not like kind of like specific occurrences, but I do understand that it's hard to it's hard for them to kind of talk about, I think. And I do think the more that we talk about it and have it out in the open with documentaries like On the Record and the R. Kelly, Surviving R. Kelly and things like that, that it helps to make them comfortable, coming forward or kind of, speaking their truth.
Yeah, I agree. I saw both of those and I thought they were so powerful. I thought they were so brave. And then I'm wondering, did you get a chance to speak more about the performance elements with the women, like there? Because now, well, what we started off in hip hop, it was a park and, in the show and would be at the park or the jam.
Right.
And now it's like full scale, pyrotechnics and all types of,
the WAP performance,
people flying from the screen.
Right.
But I'm wondering, have you had a chance to speak with them about like their shows and how they put their shows together or performances or anything like that?
Yeah. That makes me think of the WAP performance was like full on extravaganza. They had the, tribute to the I think the Nicholas brothers, like the tap dancing, which I was like, oh, that's like, like killing it. And, it's not just, standing in front of a mic and rapping, which like in the maybe like mids, like it started out as park jams and performing and just kind of being in front of a crowd. It was the whole idea of like moving the crowd has always been a part of hip hop. And so there were groups like Mercedes Ladies talked about performing very early on, and they were a group that like doesn't get a lot the recognition that they should in terms of like starting hip hop and before it even had a name. And Oaktown 357, JJ Fad talked about kind of like performing, like how much dance was crucial to them putting on a show and like getting that like widespread recognition. And Oaktowns was part of MC Hammer's. Oaktowns was MC Hammer's spin-off group. And so there's like artists like that who kind of like they were like all about putting on a show. But yeah, like those were kind of the dominant stories in terms of like the element of performance. And I think the biggest part of that for me is Missy and just all of her videos and her performances and shows are spectacles. And she, that if you're going to be watching Missy Elliott, like you're gonna get like a circus of some sort. So I wish I had gotten to speak with her, but there were some women like I couldn't you know, like I didn't get to speak with them directly, but you know, like I was able to speak to people who work with them, like, you know, producers, you know, group members, things like that. But yeah, like I think we've definitely evolved from like the show, from a show standpoint, and women kind of dominating there. Like WAP is just such a, I keep bringing it up, but it's just such a like performance song, and I feel like it holds so many elements of what makes female rap great, like the provocativeness and the like all these kind of you know, sexuality, like performance, spectacle, audacity, like all this, you know, like the imagery is just bright and colorful and wild, and you know, like it holds so many kind of multitudes basically. And I think that's what a female rap show can do. Like you can have complexity in the performance.
Yeah, and I think I'll probably just ask one more question before I invite our host to come up and ask a question.
Okay.
So what's interesting to me as well about this book is how relatable it is. Like just visually, like, you know, you broke down how it's organized, and it's just, it feels like a magazine. Like it doesn't feel like a book, like it feels like a magazine. And so maybe it's not a question per se, but it's an ask, if you could just, because we didn't go into it, just so folks know how you even you know, came to be in this space, to even, you know, be curious about all of these stories.
Yeah. So I mean, I was a very heavy reader growing up. Like I was just always in the library. I was like always in my attic reading a book when everyone was like playing outside. And I was also super into magazines. I didn't realize I wanted to be a writer until basically my second year in college. Like I went into college, excuse me, like undecided. And then, you know, I kind of like figured it out along the way. Like I thought I wanted to do music business and be a recording engineer and all that. And kind of fell into writing because I just started taking some classes, and people would always tell me that I was like a good writer. And I just didn't think of it as like a profession really. And then I was like, oh wait, I can work at Vibe. I was like, I read Vibe. And I think I saw maybe it was like Moesha episodes and like Brown Sugar. And I think I was like, oh, this is a job. And so, you know, like I kind of like slowly figured it out, and interned at Vibe and wrote for like allhiphop.com very early on. That transitioned into working for XXL magazine and Vibe as an editor and writer at Billboard. And just over the years, I've done a ton of like magazine editing, mostly like for XXL and Vibe. I was responsible for the front of the book section, which is, you know, all those little charts and like small kind of article ideas, like before you get to like the long features. And it was my job to curate, to assign, curate, conceive, edit, and sometimes write those sections. And so I did kind of develop a magazine kind of, I guess, approach to like storytelling in a way, and brought that to the book. So, you know, there are some charts throughout, like, you know, like a selection of lewd lyrics. It's just like a few, like, you know, super explicit female rap lyrics, or like, you know, I wanted to do shout outs that were smaller, kind of, you know, like little sort of mini articles about certain women. There's a white rap family tree, which is like all the white female rappers on one page. You know, so I kind of wanted to do these cool little call outs that I definitely came from, I think without me even noticing, came from my like magazine background and just thinking in like short bites, basically.
Oh my God, I love it. I'm a magazine person. I love the book, and I could read it again and again and again. There's so many nuggets, so many facts, and so many stories. It draws you in. And it's something, like you said, like you could casually read it, or you could sit there and just get lost in it, and you could share it. It's fun. And it really makes me feel seen as a woman who loves hip hop, you know, just to see someone who took the time to really make sure that all these voices were, you know, highlighted in this special way. So gratitude once again for this incredible work that you've done. You've made history. You've made her story.
Thank you. I'm so
So
glad.
thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I wanted to
So
invite, our host. Oh, there she is. Okay. I want to invite our host back up. My name is Piper Carter, and I have been hosting this conversation, and I'm very honored. This is Clover Hope, who is the author of The Motherlode. It's the book you need to get, the 100 plus women in hip hop that you should know about. And this has been a great conversation for me.
Yes,
I would like to invite our host, Allison, from Source Booksellers, to come back and close this out, ask a question.
Am I muted? No. My question is about the illustrator. Rochelle Baker.
Yeah.
Rochelle Baker.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, she's excellent. A young illustrator out of Michigan, Detroit, and I think she worked in like a comic book store. And you know, I was looking for a young Black woman to illustrate the like the women in the book, and I really was drawn to her style. And she has such a cool hip. I sound so old saying hip, but like it really is like a cool. You know, like there's Heather B, and you know, Missy Elliott. Like she just has a cool kind of. I have this one. I bought like, you know, her prints, and I have a few of them hanging on my wall. And you know, we basically work, you know, back and forth together to try to you know, come up with visuals in a way that would, you know, allow these artists to be seen as well as being read about. Because you know, with women, is like we want to remember them, so you want to also remember their image. And so that was important to kind of, as you're flipping through, it's like, oh wow, these are portraits of women, you know, to know about. She's just really dope.
And just, this is a comment. So I was also amused and enjoyed all the fashion brands that Foxy Brown mentioned in her songs, which when I look back at it, I'm like, oh yeah, she was always doing that. But
right. Yeah, and that's one of the like sidebar elements, like magazine-y type things. Show how, yeah, like style is such a crucial part of hip hop, and how women have been the ones to bring that in, introduce it. And like so many names that I hadn't known until I listened to like Kim and Foxy. Like I didn't know some of these names.
Awesome. And thank you also for putting Dej Loaf, you know, a rapper from the East Side that's fairly new, that's not, you know, one of the rappers, you know, from, you know, the beginnings of of this history, and just giving her a shout out made me feel really good. And all of the connections to our city, you know, in this book is really fantastic. And we're definitely rooting, my mom and I are rooting for this book, and putting it in as many hands as possible. And it can be found on sourcebooksellersonline.com. So thank you both. Thank you, Piper.
Thank you, Piper.
Thank you, Clover.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will have this posted so it can be viewed after today. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.